And welcome back to Reunited States, the podcast where we bring civil discourse back to our national dialogue. From Manchester, New Hampshire, my name is Jesse Saywell.
And from the burning hellscape known as Los Angeles, California, my name is Tyler Eric.
And, wow, on that note, I feel like we do have to acknowledge the tragedy. Both of us obviously love Los Angeles a great deal. It's your hometown. For me, it is my adopted hometown of sorts, and certainly the place that I feel most at home and miss very much. And it has been a really helpless feeling watching this on the news as the fires, these multiple fires, have taken hold of Southern California. My heart is with, and my thoughts are with everyone out there who is being affected by this. It's absolutely tragic. Tyler, how are you holding up throughout all of this?
Well, I'm grateful to still have my home and be in it right now. I'll say that. Not something that a lot of people can say, thousands of people can say, over in the Palisades, over in Altadena with the Eaton fire, and now there's another one up in Sylmar. We are really surrounded on all fronts here with flame. It's scary, but we're hoping that as the winds die down today, the day that we're recording this on Wednesday, that once the winds die down, it should be a bit easier for the firefighters to contain the fires. I do have friends that live in very affected neighborhoods over in those areas, so we're in constant communication with them, hoping they're okay. But so far, it seems like things are not spreading as quickly as we were worried. Now they're kind of slowing down a bit, so we're hopeful that it gets contained soon. But again, lots of damage, lots of homes lost, lots of cars destroyed, and nothing's going to bring those things back yet. So hopefully we can come back from that and repair once we get a hold of this natural disaster.
Well, I'm just, so glad that you're okay, and so glad that so many of my friends are fortunately are safe, certainly for the moment, friends and family. My mind is with them and with the entire community of Southern California. This is really devastating. But we really appreciate you, of course, continuing to join us here in the midst of this craziness. Happy 2025, I guess. Happy New Year. What a way to start. It's our first episode in several weeks, almost a month now, and there's been plenty of news. So we're going to do some lightning news here, just really quick to cover some of the things that you may have missed if you were, invested in the holiday festivities and tuning out the news, as honestly you should be. We all need to take moments to separate ourselves from the news, especially when so much of it has been as depressing as it has been recently. But
guess what? Time to tune back in.
Right. It is time to tune back in because we have to get back into the fight and get back into doing the hard work and having the hard conversations that we need to have now going forward. Here we go. Lightning news. I'll start it off. President-elect Trump named Herschel Walker the ambassador to the Bahamas. Woo.
The U.S. Surgeon General sounds the alarm about the link between alcohol and cancer, saying that there is now no safe amount of alcohol to consume.
Say it ain't so.
That sucks.
Say it ain't so. God. Former President Jimmy Carter passed away at the age of 100, leaving behind a legacy as, in my opinion, the most decent human to have ever held the office of the presidency.
President-elect Donald Trump says he would use military force if needed to retake the Panama Canal, own Greenland, something he said in his first presidency as well, and he would use financial force to encourage Canada to become the 51st state.
Oh, God, the madness has begun. On that note, President-elect Trump also says he's renaming the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. America.
Oh, God. And what, are French fries now freedom fries again?
French fries
Good
are
Lord.
now freedom fries.
That was the worst. After a dramatic reversal of votes on the House floor, Representative Mike Johnson has been re-elected as House Speaker The GOP enters this Congress with the smallest House majority in a century.
On that note, Kamala Harris certified her electoral defeat to Donald Trump, proving that at least one political party still cares about democracy.
And Donald Trump reiterates his intentions to pardon all people involved in the January 6 riots within hours of his presidency, proving that he, in fact, does not care about democracy.
President Biden claims that he would have beaten Donald Trump if he had stayed in the race. Ha! Lols. Come on, Joe. Come on.
Oh, that wasn't even the joke of this whole segment. The Supreme Court is poised to hear defense arguments on if the TikTok ban violates Americans' First Amendment rights on January 10th, with a nationwide ban on the app looming on January 19th. Notably, Trump has publicly implied that he is now against this ban, despite supporting the move during his first presidency.
We'll see how that plays out. That's going to be very interesting. And meanwhile, the most important news update that you need on conservative media, Matt Gaetz and George Santos. Remember George Santos? They discussed whether Matt Gaetz should use eyeliner on the Matt Gaetz Show, otherwise known as Criminal Central. Yeah, that's an interesting development there. Very important pressing news over there on the Matt Gaetz Show. But we do have exciting news here, a very exciting first on Reunited States. We're welcoming our first guest to the program, my good friend Cody Goulder. Welcome to the show, Cody.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me. Wow, I make history. I'm your first guest.
You are making history.
Oh, my goodness. Is this what a trailblazers feel like? Oh, my goodness.
So, Cody, we're so excited to have you. Thank you for joining us. There's a lot of reasons why why I really wanted to have you on the show, why we both really wanted to have you on the show. But in particular, your perspective as a union worker, a blue-collar worker, someone who lives in potentially the most important swing county in America, Maricopa County, which encompasses Phoenix, Arizona now. And having lived there myself, of course, I can speak to the fact that it really does feel like the most purple of purple districts. I think you've got so many insights about kind of what has happened to the Democratic Party, and I'm hoping you can kind of share some of that with us. You know, we've heard and talked a lot in the aftermath of the election about how Democrats have lost the working class voters that used to make up a major portion of their coalition. So, Cody, you're a union worker in a purple state. Have you seen this shift firsthand among blue-collar workers?
Well, you have to start specifically with Arizona for the very important detail when it comes to our union practices. Arizona is what we call a right-to-work state, meaning that to have employment, you don't need to be part of a union. It is something that is built in our bedrock, our Constitution. And because of that, when we describe unions and union practices, everybody's a little different. Every state, every organization is a little different. So with Arizona in particular, we have a very unique landscape for our unions. We have a lot of union work that happens, but we also have a lot of non-union work that happens. So getting back to the original question of what does this mean to ship with firsthand with blue-collar workers, it comes down predominantly to the way in which a union worker is seen in the state, and by and large seen by a larger spectrum of the population. We have a pretty healthy mix of conservative versus progressive-minded people within our industry, because unions, by their origin, by their history, by their development, are democratic institutions. We have unions because we want to protect workers' rights. Thanks to unions, we have pay scales, we have holidays off, we have workers' rights, and lots of other factors that are created by the use of union practices. Without the democratic process, unions do not exist, period. That being said, from about the 70s on, we continue to see the war against unions. You know, conservative, right-wing, Republican media has done a fantastic job in those 50 years, ultimately decimating what a union does and what it represents. We couple that with the rise of high technology and gig culture and fast-paced, get what I can now, neoliberalism policies, And it makes for the role of the union kind of tricky, kind of complicated. We want it, we need it, but we also don't see our presence acknowledged as essential. Now, let's go to the common interpretation of what a union is. When we think of union workers, our minds can immediately jump to something like Virginia, the Appalachians, the Ozarks. Dirty, hard-nosed, you work there for generations and generations in a unsustainable setup. In the case of coal, it's unsustainable, but people are working in the institution for the industry for years and years and years and years and years, generationally speaking. This is what we commonly think of as union. We think of that as you are stuck in something, you are working a dirty, a salt of the earth type job. It's not glamorous, it's not fancy, it will not make you $1 million. This is a national perception and a national caricature that has spread for almost 50 years now at this point. However, with the unions as they stand in Arizona, they are jobs. They keep people working, they keep people fed. They are a solid wage in which people can make a decent living. And depending on the company in which you work with, those guidelines help improve your quality of life as a union worker. What we tend to see in Arizona, we still see the influence of unions. What we see is the individual union worker trying to find their place and make ground and have security in the industries in which we are hired. And to kind of narrow it down even more, like specifically the union I work with is electrical union, IBEW 640. It's a nationally recognized union with electrical workers. And that type of union is vastly different than, say, the teachers union. They're going to have different guidelines, different perspectives, and different needs for their different chosen fields. Because ultimately, the idea of the union is to make you successful in your chosen path and field, and to get as most out of that personally as humanly possible without sacrificing everything. Because the goal of a retirement is to make sure you're secure the goal of a union is to make sure you are secure until you retire. That you have your pension, you have your funds, you have your job security and financial support that provides you the needs to live out the rest of your days. And each union is going to operate differently from profession to profession. And my feeling is when we talk about unions, first off, there are some unions that when you are first starting off in whatever your chosen field is, let's take teaching, for example. When you're in the teachers union and you're just starting off, that is an expensive union to be a part of. Now, granted, a lot of that is because your protections and your benefits are incredibly strong as a teacher. But for our first starting teacher, and I can get into that later as far as what lack of union support for incoming professionals means as far as a predatory capitalist society, but that entry is different. Now, to speak for IBEW 640, the electricians union, part of our initiation here is we have an apprenticeship. Our primary job is to educate. Because I don't know if you guys have ever seen those fantastic logos from the 70s of the electrical bolt with the knife in front of a small child saying, electricity kills everyone. It's my favorite icon, and it gets the point across. We are in a profession where danger is ever present. And so we need that education. So our primary focus in the unit is to get you educated, get you the resources you need, get you the educators, get you the person that is going to help train you as you move through the program and ultimately become the best possible electrician you can be. Because when you are your best, A, you're safe, B, you're getting a job from 9 to 5, or in my case, 6 to 2. And also you're doing something that benefits the community as a whole. I will tell this story because I was there. I was present for it. During the COVID lockdowns of the pandemic, many of us were sequestered in lockdowns in our apartments and had timed office visits and things like that. But things still continued as they would. There was dumpsters that were picked up. There was energy that was on. Water was being pumped. Food was being delivered from state to state. All of those are the benefit of union workers. They are essential workers that keep the system going. And one of the things that really hurt unions, especially during the pandemic, was the lack of acknowledgement for what the average blue-collar, nose-to-the-grindstone daily worker was doing every single day. I know personally from my experience, did I want it to be out in the world where there was a global pandemic with a disease that I could catch and spread to my family and potentially kill someone close to me? Oh God, no. Nobody wanted to do that. No one wanted to be present in that situation. But at the same time, especially because of our given profession and what we have to supply to the community, we were going out every day, braving ourselves, braving the world. And the perception around the population was we're doing the dirty things, or we're doing the grunt things, or we're doing the dangerous things. And that kind of terminology and that kind of presentation is extremely disrespectful. It makes us seem like we are second and third class citizens, in that we are just here to make the upper echelon really happy and feel really comfortable and feel really safe, out of sight, out of mind. To tie this into one of the great talking points that the Republicans had during the election in 2024, immigration. They made it a point. They put it on their posters all over the place. Beware the immigrant coming to take your job. But however, how many of these senators and how many of these representatives have a non-native English-speaking person working in their house doing something? Whether it's the cleaning, whether it's the cooking, whether it's the house care. It's the out-of-sight, out-of-mind mentality that really tends to get in the craw of the average American worker. Someone who needs to feel supported, but also does not feel that support being reflected in what our representatives are showing us.
That's,
Very well said.
Yeah, just so well said. And, it touches on several questions I had. I think you've kind of already answered about, whether the media at large or whether the national narrative kind of accurately depicts blue-collar workers. And it seems like you're saying that it does not.
I feel like it's a weird combination of education, communication, and representation. Let's start with the education part, which I feel is the most important element of how we kind of got to this point, even to begin with. I did my high school education in Arizona. Came through senior year all the way through this state. Now, Arizona historically and statistically is ranked in the bottom of education. Very much so. We don't have the same educational resources that would encourage someone to go to the trades. When I was growing up, a lot of it was about go to college. Go to college and find the degree you want, excel in the job you want. Computers are new. I'm old enough to remember that my internet was AOL and I had to dial up. I actually went to my undergraduate at Whittier College, and for the first 6 months, I was like, oh shit, how am I going to access the internet? I don't have a phone line. Wi-Fi was a new thing for me.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes, you can laugh at that. That's funny.
Well, no, I mean, I believe
it shows my age really well.
Tyler's probably similar. We're similar in age. I feel like I'm one of the youngest people to remember dial-up. To remember just younger than us don't remember this at all. But I do remember a world where the internet, especially growing up in rural America, was not a significant part of my life. It was present and I kind of understood that it existed, but for the first 7-8 years of my life, it was not a major factor.
Yeah, and even in the city, I had dial-up growing up, but I had friends at the same time did not have dial-up, and that's just because I grew up less affluent than they did. So, and that was when I was a kid. I was very, very young. I was maybe in second grade, first grade, or something like that. So definitely no one beyond us is going to remember that kind of thing. It's very much a 90s thing.
That's actually a great point, Tyler. You bring up affluence. You bring up access. You bring up the ability to essentially chart your own career. I think about this a lot, especially when it comes to internet access for us. I mean, we have our cell phones and we take the internet for granted, but depending on where you live, your access to information is going to be greater depending on the wealth of your neighborhood versus what your infrastructure looks like. And the same can be said about trade-skilled workers. I'm going to jump back here a quick second here. One of the biggest concerns that we have currently in the electricians union is just the amount of people. We don't get nearly enough people anymore, young people coming out of high school or college or whatnot, who want to be tradespeople. And a lot of that ties back to my education. My educational experience in high school and lower levels of college had very little to do with tactical trades. I couldn't tell you how to do plumbing. I couldn't tell you how to fix a car. I could only woodwork because I worked in the theater scene shop and learned how to use a saw and read a measuring tape.
I can relate there.
Yeah, so education has to come down to experience. That's a huge component of teaching people what to do and what to learn. And with the rise of the internet and the lack of, for lack of a better term, shop-based classes, tactile, hands-on classes that encouraged people's creative thinking, encourage you to look at what is tangible. And this isn't a fault. The internet's a brand new thing. We have new opportunities. Amazon was just on the rise. Google had just become kind of a thing in the early 2000s. And so our education shifted more towards computer use. It went away from the tactical things. But unfortunately, because we live in a capitalist society, the United States is capitalist. We can't ignore that. You also have people who get ahead of the game, who see an opportunity and take advantage of it. And that's the biggest rub I have seen for millennials and younger. We are consistently being preyed upon as a group because of our deer in the headlights way of reacting to the world. The Great Recession of 2008 is a massive thing that took the wind out of our sails. Internships that were for promises of a career to come were all across my early 20s and growing up. Even trades like being a teacher, you were subjugated to whatever school you were assigned to, whatever class you had, and it basically tests your mettle to see, can you follow through on this? Unfortunately, what that does not do is create a self-sufficient thinking workforce. What that does is it creates a bunch of panic drones who drive Uber cars, who drive Uber Eats, who work 8 or 9 different gig jobs just to try and stay afloat because of twofold reasons. One, they think they need that money and they need that support. And 2, because they haven't been trained in anything else. And with that lack of education, we lose the influence of newer bodies in the union, recruiting new tradespeople, recruiting new workers. We don't tell people that you can make a very good living being an electrician, being a plumber, being a trash can worker, a sanitation, sorry. We don't encourage people to think outside the box in a job that is purely meant to be a job. The narrative in America has become, be your job. Be who you want to be and make sure your job matches you 100%. I have a lot of things that I do outside of my life that have nothing to do with electric, have nothing to do with safety, have nothing to do with construction. But I look at that job and go, this is how I pay the bills. This is how I support my family. This is how I am able to sustain a way of life that I want. And we don't teach people how to do that. We tell them what this gizmo does, what this thing does, what this app does, and how someone else living thousands of miles away can dictate what our financial dollar is. Or what the merit of our work is.
Yeah, it's almost like an oxymoron because you think, I'm thinking a lot about what you said with unpaid internships because I have a lot of experience with that in my career. And a lot of what I've seen is that while we do try and say, oh, be your own person, do all these things, the nature of these internships and jobs like them is it trains subservience. All it does is trains you to be a gopher, to do certain tasks that you're being told to do, and not how to do a task or engage critical thinking or anything that you actually need to know. All we have in our now job histories and our curriculum vitae and all these things are just jobs in which we were told to do things without knowing what they are or how they are done, right? We're just told, do a task. And now that we're beyond that and we're in a stage of our life where we have to actually go and seek a job, seek a career, we don't know how to do that. We're kind of lost. There's no skills that we can bring to assist with this.
And we still rely then on our elder statesmen, whether that's a boss or a congressperson or even a president, they are asking us to do the work for them. They are asking us to buy into their system and their education and their practices and their policies, thinking that we're going to get ahead in life. And if there's one thing I feel that we can have an honest discussion about when it comes to the 2024 election, is that the American public largely said, no, we're no longer going to follow your games. We're no longer going to be sheepish. And I would argue for the last 20 years or so, a majority of the population, commonly identified as white cisgender male, who lean more red or lean more libertarian in ideologies, have been trying to find ways to break the system, and finally enough people said, this system isn't working for us, let's break it now. That could be a crazy radical thought I just threw out here, but you guys are more than welcome to educate me as well.
No, I mean, I'm curious because to me, the thing that really you touched on, the education piece, I feel like we come from a generation that was working under a different set of rules, but the people who were telling us that didn't realize it. What we were told was, or at least certainly I can speak for myself, was, go follow your passions, go follow your dreams, chase your dreams, and go get that degree. The degree is the way to do that. It doesn't matter what your degree is in. I remember this, and granted, I'm a theater person. Like, I have 2 degrees in theater. Would I do that if I could go back and do it again? I mean, it worked out for me. I'm very happy with my life. But looking back on it, I have so many friends who just got screwed from this kind of follow your passions mentality, and that the degree is the means to an end. For most people, they don't need a degree in theater to be successful in the theater. That's not to say that I don't believe in theater as an academic perspective. I do. I believe in the arts. I believe in arts education. Of course, I am one. But we need to be honest about kind of the realities of these situations. And I remember sitting down with a mentor of mine, a professor, who said, and I said, I feel like I need a backup plan. And he said, well, the degree is the backup plan. And that was true for him in the 1980s. It was true for my dad in the 1970s to early 80s. It was true for them that the degree was the backup plan. But it's not the same. The rules have changed. Society has changed. The value of degrees have gone down so much. And I do feel like in some capacity the Democratic Party has spent most of the last 20 years trying to say we need more people to get 4-year degrees so that they can be like us. Rather than saying, how do we encourage you to find success with the skill sets that you have? And what happened was so many people, and I have so many friends, who went to college for 4-year degrees and either got degrees that weren't beneficial to them, or they couldn't finish because they really shouldn't have gone and pursued a 4-year degree. They should have gone to a trade school. They should have moved into a different area, but they were told that the only means of reaching success was to get this 4-year college degree.
And to go one step further, they were actively, and this is something that I've seen a lot, is they also were told that these other methods of getting education and these other jobs that didn't require education were lower, right? Were somehow not worth the same salt as getting a 4-year degree. That not just get a 4-year degree to be like us, to be smart, to be educated, to get a good job, to be a lawyer, a doctor. But they were also, at the same time, they were saying, so you don't have to be an electrician. So you don't have to pick up trash. So you don't have to do all of these things that, like I said earlier, are very, very important jobs, very necessary jobs, very good jobs for a lot of people. But we grew up thinking and being told by a lot of people in power that telling us that these are somehow beneath us, that we shouldn't be looking at these things as options, even though the truth is anything but.
And Tyler, to piggyback on that, because you make up a great point there as well, but I'll go one step further. America, the United States, is made of immigrant populations. We talk about the American dream. We talk about how our immigrant forefathers came from somewhere and made a life for themselves and did for their children and their grandchildren and their grandchildren's grandchildren. That narrative is very strong and obviously motivates all of us as American citizens, especially young Americans, to follow our passions and follow the career we want. And on top of that narrative also shifts to immigrant populations. It's not lost on us that a lot of union workers are not middle-class white Americans. That there's a healthy population of hardworking people who are not born from America on soil, but they're promised the American dream, and their children are promised that. And now, 20 years removed, we've hit a population that's 3rd, 4th generation, and they don't see themselves as immigrant per se. They don't want that label. They'll identify as Latino, as Black American, as Asian, but they also will identify themselves as American. They don't see themselves as where their bloodline came from. And it's a message that I firmly see the Democratic Party missing the point. They want to still be the Immigrants Unite Party. The Immigrants Unite Party is aging. They're getting older. They are in their 50s, their 60s, some of them even in their 70s, some have passed on. And we have an entire generation now of people who have grown up with their cell phones, with their 24-hour news cycles, knowing that they are Americans. And they don't want to do the immigrant experience because they don't identify themselves as such. And especially in this election, that narrative got co-opted by the Republicans, who said someone else is going to come take your job and someone else is going to be here. But they also took the Democrats and said, well, what jobs are you offering me? How are you going to protect me when the other guy is saying, I'm going to get rid of your competition. I'm going to kick out the competition. So what are you guys going to do? If that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, you described my grandparents to a T, to be honest with you, about the aging Latino population, because they're totally in that boat. They're mostly, right leaning, and they're right leaning for that very exact reasoning, is that the messaging that they're getting on the Republican side, as much as I personally disagree with it, it's at least it makes sense to them. It makes sense to them in a way that the Democratic message does not make sense to them, and so it makes sense that they would align themselves with the message that is clearer to them.
Yeah, and it's messed up because I definitely do not agree with Republican ideology. Jesse's known me for a long time. Never have, never will. But at least they have a plan. At least they can go to a kid who is coming out of high school and say, I have a plan for you. It may be wrong for you in the long haul, but I have a plan. The Democratic Party, especially in the last 8 years or so, really spoke to platitudes. And who's speaking? It's a bunch of white people. It's your Pelosi's and your Schumers who are from the most populous, most expensive cities in the United States, telling Jane, Joe, and Bobby Worker in the heartland of America, in the suburbs of Chicago or Florida or Arizona, telling someone who does not have the economic power they do how to live, how to be, what to do, and what their dollar means to them. I want my dollar to matter to me. I don't want my dollar to matter to somebody who's going to blow smoke up my butt. Like, speaking purely from Arizona and our political ideology, we had Kyrsten Sinema as our senator for 6 years. And that is not the type of senator I want in Arizona. And unfortunately, I made the mistake of voting for Kyrsten Sinema because she's a Democrat. At the time, she was running as a Democrat, and I wanted a Democrat because I wanted Senate control because I believed the Senate would make things happen. And I should preface it by saying, I'm still a Democrat. I'm a pissed off Democrat. I'm socially progressive, but I'm still that. So I haven't turned my back on the party, but I can still be pissed.
Yeah, I mean, join the club there. Because, when I look at the party, it's frustrating to me that we're losing some of these great statesmen. They're losing races because of the national party. So you've got people like John Tester in Montana, who is a fantastic senator for well over 10 years, almost 20 years in Montana, just lost an election. You have Sherrod Brown, senator from Ohio, again, could not outrun the toxic brand that is the Democratic Party on the national level. And because those people, those voices are not propped up within the party. Because, the coastal elites, which is a real thing, they don't speak to people in these parts of the world. They have given up on people in the flyover states. And they have given up trying to engage with them. And, I mean, have you seen Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, any of these people who I respect, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to trash on these people, but have you seen them in the way they try to engage with rural voters? Think back to 2020, when all those people were going to Iowa. Who won Iowa? It was Pete Buttigieg barely edging out Bernie Sanders. It was not the rest of these kind of clowns that came there trying to act like something they weren't. They hadn't been it, and now all of a sudden they're showing up to the Iowa State Fair like, yeah, I'll eat a corn dog. Wait, how many calories are in this? Like, that's the ridiculous, offensive thing, is you have to actually live this and go out of your way to talk to normal everyday people who live in communities that are outside your bubble, and they simply don't. And it's infuriating to a lot of us who have lived in these places, because I understand why people in small town America and in rural America and even suburban America feel like, wow, the leaders of the Democratic Party don't talk to people like me because they have literally never had a conversation with me. They talk down to me.
Well, it doesn't help that even that within the inner circle of Democratic Party, it's a very small circle of people, and when we do see potential in in rising stars in the party that come from maybe a working class background or something that's actually beneficial to reaching out to these groups, they're not assisted by the inner circle. It's like they would rather put up people that pay into this inner circle. They want to keep it within themselves and not allow new voices into that discussion. And as a result, they're not going to allow what we probably believe is the right person to take over the party as we need to. Like, instead, this death grip that's being held on by all these older people who refuse to, give up not maybe their seat per se, but like the power they have within the party at the very least, refusing to abdicate or even share with rising stars that really could bring a breath of fresh air and maybe even like reach out more honestly to these communities that we desperately need to like speak to again.
And if I may very quickly, the voices that we have propped up largely over the last 8 years have been voices that live in liberal bubbles. I mean, look at the Squad. Look at the Squad, and I'm not saying this as I dislike the Squad. I actually really have a lot of respect for a lot of them. I agree with them on a lot of positions. But in terms of the face of the Democratic Party, why is it people from the most blue of blue districts that we have spent all this time propping up, who, again, who don't seem like they have ever spend any time engaging with people outside of their districts, and most of them, AOC has shifted in recent years, has seemingly kind of gone back to her roots as a working class person, which she was, but for so many of them, you've seen them kind of like disregard the opinions of people who live in more rural communities.
I really see that as the wealth discrepancy issue. I truly do. When you look at that is the commonality between them. Like, yes, they're diverse, and that's fine. That's great. I mean, that's good. That is objectively a good thing. But I mean, when you have a wealth discrepancy like that, like, it speaks louder than words, And in my opinion, at least, it's like that economic divide is what's going to prevent them from ever seeing the same way. And you could have an upbringing that is less wealthy, but honestly, the reality of it is now that you're a politician, now that you're in the Senate or wherever in the House, you are a very wealthy individual by this point, and you've probably been so for a very long time. And by then, like, yeah, you can go back to your roots, but those roots are so far in the past that I don't know if you even have the ability to reconnect with people that are currently in that same economic position. You can't reach that divide if you have that wealth, Like, you can't see it.
And shifting it back to the conversation about unions a little bit, we see that. We see that optic all the time. In my day-to-day, 70% of the people I talk to think Donald Trump is an idiot. And he's terrible for this country. He's going to make a bunch of bad decisions. That is a belief. That is a core belief in an Arizona-based electrical company that works with a union that's nationally recognized. Arizona, as the media likes to call the Florida of the West. And yet, if you get down to the nitty-gritty of it, people aren't stupid. People acknowledge that the Republicans are full of shit. But they also acknowledge that the Democrats didn't give them a better option, period. It's hard to look at someone who's working a 9-to-5 job for their kids, for their wages, for their pension, just trying to stay afloat when a minimum wage has not changed in decades, but the cost of living has gone up. And you go to buy groceries for your food and for your family, and they're astronomical. You can't have a discrepancy like that. You can't be saying one thing, which is your leadership, which is the people who are supposed to be working for you, that you selected to represent you, and constantly be seeing the mismatch. This is one of the firm beliefs that I have why so many blue-collar, union, hard labor workers acknowledge that the Republicans are full of shit. They acknowledge it, and they still voted one way. And bear in mind, we also have the popular optics that all blue-collar workers are inherently red. We see people drive around with their work service trucks with a Trump flag or a don't blue my Texas flag or wherever. We see that optically, and because we are more image-based, we see something, we recognize something, we react to something, that we automatically assume, oh, all construction workers must inherently be sexist, they must inherently be racist, they must inherently be Trump supporters, which in reality is the farthest thing from the truth. Completely. More often than not, your union worker is always going to be Democrat. They believe in the values of what the Democratic Party presented to create said unions: equal wages, paid time off, ability to support myself and his family, to have a pension, to have a job and a place to go should you lose said job. Like, how many people do we talk to in our age bracket that are under 40 years old that when they lose their job, the world falls apart on them because they don't have the means to go find another one? Because maybe they put their heart on that one job that they wanted their entire life, it's gone, and they don't know what the fuck to do next. So, and again, getting back to the optics of it, I have had personal conversations with multiple people in our own company who, if you looked at them walking down the street, said, oh, they're totally a Trump voter. No, they're not. You would also look at my industry and say, oh, this is totally all cisgender white dudes or people that came from, quote fingers, clearly immigrant families. And that's also just not true. I tell this story a lot. Case in point, about a year ago, I hired a warehouse person within our own company who identified as non-gender and queer LGBTQ plus person. Not someone optically you would think would fit in the construction industry. Their coworker was a conspiracy theory-minded, libertarian, alternative government option blowhard who would say the most ridiculous things. 1 year of working together, they are the best team. They have worked through the things they disagree on. They have educated each other. They have seen each other as people, and they are a fantastic team that collaborates. It should be a case study in what happens when you just engage people on the most basic human level, not ideologically, not headline grabbing, not whatever. Like, I can't compete with someone talking about politics on a day-to-day because I don't listen to Joe Rogan. Quite frankly, I don't know why Joe Rogan is popular. In my mind, this is still a guy that paid $25,000 for people to eat cow dicks.
Fear factor. Oh, those are the days.
Joe, if you're listening, Joe.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, Joe, I remember what you were, Mr. I'm pitching a whiny fit because Carlos Mencia stole my jokes. Before you were Mr. UFC watch boy.
Yes.
When you had hair.
Barely.
We're coming for you, Joe. We're coming for you.
But it comes to show, just in the experience of life, that you can try and ignore the disagreements that you have with an individual person. But when you have the fundamental cores of who people are and what they want, a lot more can get done. Thankfully, the structure of union work and just the fact that it forces you to communicate with others, and it also values you as an individual. What you bring to the job is what matters. Another case study, immediately, right in the moment of our industry, I have an electrician currently in our company who started as an apprentice in their 30s. Okay, we usually look at our 30s and go, if you don't have your job by then, clearly you've done something wrong. That's the overarching meta-narrative we've created for people in your 30s. You don't have your dream job yet, you're screwed. This person had a complete career change. in their 30s. Completely. Going to school to become an electrician. Going to the classes. Spending more money to get that education they need. But they have excelled far beyond what even they thought they were capable of. To the point where they have a strong support within our own company network, within that union brotherhood network, to see someone as an individual that says, okay, you may not know all the answers. You may not be perfect at everything. But God damn it, you ask questions. You show up on time. You don't quit. You're teachable. Okay, you're fine by us. And it's not a narrative that is carried over into our daily lives. We see people as disposable. Oh, you said something stupid this one day. Goodbye. You're gone out of your life. We throw out the entire value of the person or what that person brings to a day-to-day life. Because we want the clicks, because we want the likes, because we want the shares, because we feel like we have to get ahead of somebody else to be successful, and that's not true. And I wish the Democratic Party really got back to the what can we do for each other. I feel like Obama had that. Obama had yes, we can. The camaraderie spirit. The problem with the Obama era is they never followed through on it. It became a lot of talking platitudes for 5 years, and then it's down spiraled ever since. And part of that is because of the regimes that were in charge. Part of that is Senate control. Part of that is how different candidates come in and out of the cycle. As you mentioned earlier, guys, about who gets propped up in the party to do what and cycle with who. All those things continue to spiral to allow us to have this conversation where our president's a dumbass Oompa Loompa.
And on that note, Cody, I mean, we could sit here and talk for hours.
I think we could. I think we just opened a Pandora's box of things.
We did. I mean, we could talk to you for hours here about this. You know, there's so much, and you know, you have exemplified why I think you're such a great first guest here, because you are walking the walk in terms of how to reunite the states. You talk about that there, you know, about bridging the gaps. And you and I have both taken a lot of shit. All three of us here have taken a lot of shit for saying that you need to reach out to people who disagree with you politically. You need to reach out to Trump voters. And it's not easy. It's not always easy. And I recognize that for some of us, it is easier than others. Like that, you know, that is a reality. But we have to do it. We have to find a way, because half the country supports this man. Whether they want to or not, half the country supports this man. And we have to find a way to coexist. Those people are not just going to move and leave the country. And it's so important to hear from someone like yourself in, again, a very critical state, a very critical county, and in an industry where you don't have an option to just shut out everyone of your life who you disagree with. And I think most people throughout the country don't have that option. It's high time that we start reminding the people who live in the bubbles that, like, that's the way it should be. We shouldn't just be able to just, like, isolate ourselves from anyone who disagrees with us.
Well, that's why I love what you guys do in this podcast. You know, we're having these discussions not because we don't care, but because we want to see the change. We want to see the progress. We want to know that people are valuable. And I thank you guys for having me on here. Like, if you ever want me to come back, I have zero issue with hopping on. And you're 100% right, Jesse. Like, it's super easy to look at this past election and say, oh, it was sexism that won. It was racism. It was xenophobia. It's so easy to do that because it's the easiest catch-all thing. I hate to break it to anybody listening out here. Sexism, misogyny, xenophobia, racism. You're talking about every election that's ever happened since we signed the Declaration of Independence. Remember, this is a country that was founded on racism, that was founded on institutionalized slavery of kidnapping people from another country against their will and making them feed our capitalist machine. And if we don't have the conversations now that actually break it down into a tangible faction to say, no, this is what we do. Because bottom line, the Democrats didn't have a plan. The Republicans did. The Republicans had a shitty plan, but it was better than no plan. And now, and I've said this time and time to people, and they think I'm crazy when I say this, but I'll say it to you guys right now. We are now at a point where there is no longer Saturday Night Live making sketches about, hey, are you certifying the election? Well, Trump didn't win the popular vote, so you could, not vote for him. Ha 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 ha. We no longer have a discrepancy between electoral college and popular vote. We no longer have a pandemic. We no longer have an 80-year-old president who is taking care of things. All the scapegoats and all the answers are gone. It is now the president-elect, his party, his house. It has been clearly decided. It has been clearly demonstrated. That's it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. So we can do one of two things. We can cry and whine and piss our way through 4 years, or we have a service to hold every single choice this administration makes accountable, to acknowledge the bullshit, to call out every single thing that is making your life harder in America. And if things are better in America, great. Take the lesson, learn it, keep running it back. Figure out a way for Democrats to win in 2028 by getting back to the grassroots natures. That's my platform I've continued to stand on since November. It's fucked up and I don't like it, but hey, that's what I've come to understand. That's what I've come to realize. That's what I come to preach. And thank you guys for having me. This was a blast. I love the conversation too. Thank you guys for making this podcast so we can start having these conversations and we can get the ball rolling to actually make the America we want moving forward. So thank you guys for doing this. Thank you guys for having me. I've had an absolute blast, and I hope this is the first of many more conversations to come.
That was Cody Goulder, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as we did. What a great first guest to have on Reunited States, and looking forward to having him back. We're going to continue to have guests in the coming weeks and months ahead and be able to bring in different perspectives so that you're not just getting bored listening to the two of us yammer on. It's really, so important to bring in different perspectives and, continue to do the work that we are tasking ourselves and tasking all of you to do, which is, again, to bridge these gaps. But on to our favorite segment here, things we can all agree on. I'm going to start off today, and I'll be honest with you, as an atheist, which isn't shocking to most of you who know me, but as an atheist, this isn't a speech that I ever thought I would be giving, but things we can all agree on. Over the past few years, something has become increasingly clear to me, and it's something I can't ignore any longer. America needs more good Christians. Now, before anyone jumps to conclusions, let me explain. When I say good Christians, I'm talking about the ones who embody the heart of what Christianity is supposed to stand for. Compassion, humility, forgiveness, love for one's neighbor, care for the poor, a commitment to peace. And I'm talking about people like Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter's recent passing was a sobering moment for many of us, and not just because we lost a former president. We lost a man who walked the walk. A man who didn't just preach love and service, but lived it every day. He built homes for the homeless. He worked tirelessly to eradicate diseases. He spent his life trying to make the world a little better, not because it was easy, but because it was right. He wasn't perfect. No one is. But he tried to live his faith in a way that healed rather than hurt. And here's the problem. We don't have enough Jimmy Carters anymore. So many good Christians, people who truly lived those values, have left their churches. And that's in my own family. Both of my parents were Christian. And my dad, who is still alive, has left the church many years ago because of extremism. They've been driven away by radicalism, by institutions that seem more interested in wielding political power than embodying spiritual truth. They've watched their faith co-opted by those who use it to justify hatred, division, and cruelty. And rather than fight, many have chosen to walk away. And I can't blame them. I'd probably do the same. But that exodus has left a vacuum. And into that vacuum have stepped voices that don't represent the best of Christianity. They represent its darkest impulses. The ones who preach exclusion instead of inclusion, judgment instead of grace, power instead of service. And I say this as someone who has no personal stake in Christianity. I don't believe in God, and I don't go to church. But I do believe in the impact of good people and good communities. I believe in the power of kindness and empathy to shape our society. And I've seen that in so many of my Christian friends. People who live up to the true values of their faith, who serve their communities, who give without expecting anything in return. We need those people now more than ever. We need them to reclaim their faith from the extremists. We need to infiltrate the factions that have strayed so far from the teachings of Jesus, bring them back to reality. Because let me tell you something about radicals. They thrive in echo chambers. They thrive when no one is there to challenge them, when no one is willing to say, hey, this isn't what we're about. And the only people who can do that effectively aren't people like me. They're the ones who share their language, share their faith, and share their traditions.
Beautifully said, Jesse. And, as a proud Roman Catholic myself, I can't agree with you more. It's the easiest thing in the world because we all we have to do is go back to the catchphrase that has existed for my entire life, and certainly something that was on every wristband when I was a kid. What would Jesus do? Come on. Like, when did we stop asking ourselves, what would Jesus do? When did Christians start hating people of other religions and not caring about the poor? I mean, come on, dude. These are literally all the classic Jesus things that made him who he was, that made him important as a leader of the faith. To take the words out of the Bible, he went across the aisle every time, Gentile or Jew, woman or man. He shook the hands of lepers. Come on, these are classic Jesus teachings that we all learned growing up. If you grew up in a Christian church, it's there. I guarantee you heard it. But somehow people forgot about it. And it's time to remember. It's time to remember that...
Que aria Jesus!
There you go. It's time to remember that he went across the aisle on every single front. If he did it, there's no excuse that you can't do it. But my things we can all agree on is that we really need to calm the fuck down about celebrity news. And it bothers me. It really does. Over the weekend, it was big news that Tom Holland and Zendaya got engaged. Great for them. Very happy. I hope they have a long, prosperous life together, etc., etc. But holy Lord, at the end of the day, they're just people living a normal life. Or at least they're trying to live a normal life. If it weren't for paparazzi and for all these magazines and people obsessing over their every move. And naturally, these people are endorsing all of these celebrity news parasites. And it's so sad to see. Like, I scroll through social media, I'm seeing like gazillions of pictures of them walking together, talking about the size of her ring and like, what are they going to do for their wedding? And, all these things. And I'm like, dude, can we leave them alone, man? Like, does that really matter to you that much that you have to invade their personal space and their personal life because, I don't know, placate yourself or just for entertainment? I mean, to me, that's sad. Like, if that were me, if I had even the slightest inkling of fame that made it so my every move was in some crappy magazine somewhere, dude, I would hate my life. I would hate it. Hate it. And I am sure that there are people with said fame that hate this culture of obsession over them. And I feel for them. But can we just leave people alone? Especially when it comes to personal things, marriage, divorce, engagement, children. These are not things that are part of their career. It's entirely possible to enjoy films and the actors within them without needing to obsess over their private and social lives. So please, as we once said in 2007, leave Britney alone.
But
no buts.
But what about...
Leave Britney alone.
I just want Britney to leave me alone. If you've watched those videos recently, I don't want her anywhere near me. I don't care.
She had a really rough childhood, man.
She did. And she's having a really rough adulthood, too. Because, I mean, look, I empathize, but Man, I just want her to stay away from me and stay out of the kitchen, Brittany. Stay away from the knives.
Oh, good Lord.
Stay away from the knives, please.
Oh,
For
man.
the sake of everyone.
And with that, I think we have spoken enough for today. This has been an extra long episode of Reunited States, featuring our very first and awesome first guest, Cody. Thank you so much for joining us. From Los Angeles, California, my name is Tyler Eric.
And from the Creaky Tiki Room in Manchester, New Hampshire, my name is Jesse Saywell.
And this has been Reunited States, available anywhere that you get podcasts. Please stay safe, everyone. If you are affected by the fires in Los Angeles, like I might be soon enough, please stay safe, evacuate, get your pets safe, get your belongings, your important paperwork, all that stuff in order. Be well out there. And don't forget, talk to your neighbor. Reunite the States.
When the whole world has got you down and there's no one else around,